Okay, now let me start the panel session. So we have truly 4 distinguished speakers on this topic. And let me introduce the first speaker. First speaker is the Professor Selah Imro Horoglu of the Marshall School of the Business at the University of Southern California. Please join me welcoming Professor Imro Horoglu.
I hope my voice is better. We'll find out soon. I apologize for the fact that I literally lost my voice yesterday. I think it's coming back. What I would like to do is summarize some of my research in the area of aging. I'm from USC Marshall School of Business, and this is going to summarize some of my work with my co-authors, Sagiri Kitao, who will be joining Keio soon, and Tomoaki Yamada, who's at Meiji University. So I'll make a very brief introduction, motivate the talk. Then I'll give you a very simple model of the Japanese economy with some predictions for the future. And finally, I'll talk about the path for future research. Shirakawa-san mentioned the issues already. Japan has one of the highest debt to GDP among advanced economies. Furthermore, it's facing very rapid aging. And in particular, this aging is going to imply a significant increase in government expenditures over the next few decades. So the issue is, how can we deal with the aging-related expenditures without really relying on further accumulation of debt? And that's a very big issue. Again, just to give you some data from Ministry of Finance website, or this one's actually from the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare, you can clearly see from the population pyramid stacking up towards the older ages. And in 2055, we will need 1.2 workers to pay for the benefits, retirement benefits of one retiree. So almost 1-to-1. Now, 2055, about 40 years from now, you will be in your prime working age. You will be toward the end of your working age possibly, but you will be facing very high tax rate if nothing is done. So the population pyramids really show a very dark picture of aging. So the question is, what should Japan do? There you go. Now, this is too small for you to read possibly, but it's from a speech Shirakawa-san, when he was the governor at Bank of Japan, gave back in 2012, 2 years ago. And I think he made the following important observation. He said, aging is fine as long as we start doing something about it now. Now, so what are the suggestions made by Shirakawa-san? He said, we need to get more people into the workforce. Now, there are different ways of doing that. We could raise fertility, bring more Japanese workers into the workforce. We could try to increase or create policies to incentivize a higher participation of females in the labor force. Or we can maybe postpone the retirement age and have older workers work in the marketplace, or possibly bring in what Germany did back in the 60s and 70s, bring in foreign workers. In fact, a good chunk of my research program is literally following this prescription to figure out the impact on the Japanese fiscal situation of increased fertility or increased immigration or increased female labor force participation. A second, and more, let me mention the third one, important aspect is we really need to reorient businesses toward the productivity. And I interpret this as essentially the third arrow that Abenomics is all about. So what I'm going to do over the next few minutes is to talk about the implications from a model for Japan about which one of these ideas will best help us deal with aging-related expenditures. So think about a model in which there's a very large number of people from young, very young, to older people like me, different genders, male, female. And the reason is in Japan, there's a significant difference in labor force participation rates and labor market earnings of males and females. So the model will have a very representative population from Japan. And in this model, what we want to do is have people with different jobs. Some of them will have regular jobs, some of them irregular jobs. Some people will be self-employed, some people will be unemployed. And these fractions will be very representative of the actual Japanese economy. And then we are going to implement Japanese pension rules in great detail. And therefore, the model is going to look very similar to how a Japanese, the actual economy works. We are going to make the smallest set of assumptions as small as possible. But what we will do is go to microdata in Japan, either the BSWS or FIES or the National Survey of Family Income and Expenditures, microdata from Japan, to try to represent the Japanese consumption, earnings, and asset holding decisions as truthfully as possible. So we are going to restrict the model in the sense that it will be realistic concerning the Japanese economy. And then we are then going to say, well, what if nothing is done and we allow aging as projected to continue to resume? What will happen to debt to GDP in Japan? Well, the short answer is it's going to go to incredible heights. But the really important question we want to ask in this model is, what are the impacts of different types of reforms on fiscal stability in Japan? The first experiment that we have is extending the normal retirement age, as the question was asked before, from 65 to 70, and at the same time reduce retirement benefits by 10%. So this is a fairly significant pension reform, and let me brush away the very important issue of the silver democracy and if this is even feasible. But as an economist, it's our job to give the policymakers and the public the effects of such a reform. So what's the impact of this? The impact is best seen in this column. This is the pension-related budget deficit. This is almost going to zero. In other words, if we have this particular pension reform, a significant portion of the budget deficit will be solved. So this should be on the table as Japan goes forward. A second reform we will look at is raising the consumption tax. Now, obviously, this consumption tax was supposed to go up to 10%, but it was postponed to probably April 2017. The question we ask in this experiment is, what happens if it is raised to 20%? Now, what happens is, as you can see, the non-pension deficit is entirely eliminated, and therefore this really does help bring the non-deficit part of the budget into a surplus. And therefore, an increase in the consumption tax should also be on the table as part of a package as the economy ages. Now, the next and last experiment I'll talk about is higher female labor force participation. And to this, let me give you some pictures. This is the labor force participation rate of males, men, in Japan. And there are three types of jobs in this graph. Regular job, blue. Regular plus contingent, regular is red. The fraction of males with regular jobs, like full-time employment jobs, plus contingent jobs, plus all male labor force participation, extremely high. Starts to come down by 65 or so. Now, let me quickly show you the same picture in females. Let me go back. Come back to females. Two big differences. Overall, the average participation rate is very low of females. And number two, take a look at the fraction within females that have regular jobs, barely 30%. Now, the M shape seems to be disappearing, but the key takeaway from these two graphs is average labor force participation of females low, and conditional on that, the fraction that has regular jobs is low. Now, why is this important? Take a look at the earnings of males and females. Huge difference. Males, females. So in this experiment I'm going to show you next, we allow females to have the same labor force participation rate as males in Japan. Is that going to really help us overcome the fiscal issues? What this graph shows is that the non-pension part almost is balanced out. But this is not going to really get the job done as far as the pension side of the budget is concerned. So again, our research suggests that not a single particular reform will solve the aging-related problem in Japan. The solution has to come from many different areas. Clearly, more pension reform is going to help. An increase in the consumption tax to the plan, 10% and possibly a little bit more will help. An increase in the labor force participation by females definitely will help. And my colleague, my friend Tony Brown will talk about the health side of the issue as well. Okay, so what am I working on these days? The last 2 or 3 slides. We have just built a model of guest workers for Japan, and we are, as I speak, running computer code to get some results on the impact of immigration in Japan. The question we're asking is, as Shirakawa-san mentioned, how many workers, either a flow per year or stuck at a point in time, will it take to solve the fiscal problem in Japan? And as he suggested, I fear that number will be very large. But at least there will be a number on the table from which you can start some discussion. So this is one of the directions of my research. The second is we are building a model of female labor force participation with the key policy being a government subsidy toward child care to reduce the cost of raising a child. How large does this program have to be to allow a larger fraction of females to participate in the labor market, just like France has done in the past? So this is also an ongoing research project. Now, I have one more slide left, and let me just mention the following. The third arrow is very critical to increase innovation and productivity. And that's a very fertile research program that's going on these days. But I think I do agree that we need a fourth arrow, and that has to do with societal aging and developing institutions and policies to help us have a better future. And let me mention, there's a lot of young people here. This is from Japan Times. I think it really summarizes the aging issue. It says, and also talks about Abenomics. Think of Abenomics as a lot of dog treats, a lot of fiscal stimulus and so on. And of course, who doesn't like treats? As young people, you like to eat chocolate and candy, and you do that. And says, well, what's going to happen in the long run? Well, somebody has to clean up the mess. Now, we are too old to clean up the mess. You will be the ones cleaning up the mess unless we, the older people, really start the innovations and institutions to deal with aging. And I'll stop on this note. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sero. So we would like to have questions after the second speaker. So let me introduce the second speaker. Second speaker is the Dr. Tony Brown, Senior Advisor of the FRB Atlanta. Please join me welcoming Dr. Brown.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and it's a real pleasure to be back here today. I was told that there's going to be a lot of undergraduates here in the audience, and I've made a deliberate effort to try to be more like a teacher as compared to an academic. And I hope that this will kind of reach out to you and help you understand in a personal sense the issues that we're facing here in Japan. So you know, we're all familiar with the three arrows of Abenomics, and I think that everybody would agree that Japan is in a better situation now as compared to before the launch of Abenomics at the end of 2012. The policies are bearing some fruit. There's still challenges. I think what you've been hearing today from Shirakawa-san and also Selo is that there's an obstacle. And in the United States, we talk about an 800-pound gorilla. So it's kind of a big obstacle. Okay, so what's an 800-pound gorilla? Well, let me try to put that in a Japanese context. Think of it as Fat the Boo. So if you're familiar with Dragon Ball, so I used to watch Dragon Ball Z every morning with my kid. And you know, Fat the Boo is you can imagine, think about Abe-san kind of pushing his stomach. And he's just sitting there and smiling and not moving. Okay, so there's this 800-pound gorilla, and so what is it? Well, the reason Fat Boo is so large is that there's the massive debt-GDP ratio. You know, this is very large by international standards, and in particular, it's much larger than other countries that have recently experienced sovereign debt crises, such as Greece or Portugal. So there's not only is he big, but there's an elevated risk that he could explode. Now, the other thing that you've been hearing today is demographic change, that Japan is aging, the proportion of older Japanese in the population is going to grow old, okay? But there's something even more basic underlying that, which is if we just hold fixed the demographics and think about this debt-GDP ratio, what's happened in the past? Well, moving backwards from about, you know, if we go back to the early 1990s, the debt-GDP ratio in Japan was 60%. And so looking backwards, where we are now, we're around 244%. What's happened over that period is taxes were low between 1990 and 2014. Low for whom? Low for people that were working. Low for me. I was a great beneficiary of this as I was working in Japan from 1998 until 2010. My taxes were low as compared to what they've had to have been to keep the debt-GDP ratio stable at 60%. Okay? Now, what does that mean for me? Well, in my case, it worked out pretty well because I benefited from the low taxes and I emigrated from Japan. And so when taxes go up, I'm going to avoid them. And I'm not the only person who's going to realize this benefit. More generally, people who are older and enter retirement are going to be the beneficiaries. Who's going to pay the burden? You guys. You'll face higher taxes in the future to bring the debt-GDP ratio down. Now let me talk about aging. There's some numbers here. I think there's one number that's very impressive here, which is the life expectancy of females, average life expectancy in 1947. It's not just aging that's changed in Japan. Life expectancy has gone up, fertility rates have gone down, and let's try to make this real concrete. Consider the situation of a female in 1947 who's marrying an eldest son, okay? Now, what was the obligation then, the traditional obligation? Well, you marry the eldest son, you move in with the in-laws, you need to take care of the mother-in-law. How long would you have had to take care of her? Well, she was only going to live to 54. If you do the same thing now, and think of, or in 2045 and think about this, so you get married at 30 and you're going to take care of her for, you know, until age 90. So you're talking about 60 years as compared to maybe 15 or 20 years. And so these numbers are really, really big and have a profound impact. Japan's long-term care insurance for the elderly came about because we could see that this traditional contract was no longer going to work when mother-in-laws live until age 90. the bottom line from all this demographic change is not only is Fat Boo big, but he's getting fatter, okay? So government expenditures are on long-term care, health care, they're going to double. These are my projections in the model that's along the lines of Sello's. It's got behavioral properties I'll talk about in a second. Government expenditures on public pensions are also going to rise from 11% to GDP percent. What does this mean for you, for undergraduates? It means you're going to pay a lot more for taxes during your working career as compared to how much your parents paid. You're going to pay more because you'll have to pay higher taxes to reduce the size of Fat Boo, and also more to deal with the fact that he's getting fatter. Well, you know, one thing that we all know is, you know, taxes, they're set by the government, and how much taxes you pay over your lives is going to depend on the actions of current and future governments. Policymakers are aware of aging, and they have taken actions. We were talking about some of those actions they've taken already before the conference. But they have taken actions, and you know, in my research, I'm going to talk about a little bit of the results of my research. We ask, are the actions taken to date sufficient? And as Sello found with his framework, we find in our alternative framework that the answer is no. I'll also show you how urgent is the need to take corrective actions. And let's just jump on. This is going to be a model where agents optimize, so they make decisions. They make retirement decisions, savings decisions, consumption decisions. It's joint work with a colleague of Sello's, Doug Joines, and a co-author of his. And they're forward-looking, so they anticipate the fact that the changes in future changes in government policy. This is what I call the kicking the can down the road policy. Suppose we do nothing. Actually, we do something that was, that we've delayed the increase of the value-added tax, right? So it's been kept at 5%, so it's been delayed by 1 year. So this is a little bit more optimistic. I'm assuming that it does go up in 1 year later, 2016. But if you do no other actions other than everything that's been legislated, how much time does it buy you? Well, what this behavior model says is that the debt GDP ratio will hit 3.5 GDPs by 2039. Now, according to a whole range of models of default, that's way, way above the threshold where default becomes kind of a real possibility. And so let's assume there's a fiscal consolidation at that point. You fix the problem. How much do taxes have to go up? To 57%. And that's using the consumption tax to fix the problem. So if we do nothing until 2039, we're talking about a 57% tax rate. Now, who would accept this? Would you guys accept this? You know, your taxes going from 10% to 57%? I wouldn't. Okay, and so, you know, in the paper we argue that, well, this is so serious that there's bound to be some element of default. So in a sense, this is an upper bound of how much time we have before there's a severe fiscal crisis that results in default. Now, how are agents in my model thinking? Well, you know, they look at this scenario and they feel very poor, so they work harder, save less, and consume less. What about you? Let's think optimization more generally. Given this scenario, what would you do? Well, you see 57% tax rates in 2039. Well, one thing you might want to consider doing is emigrating in 2038. Go someplace else. You can't really fix this problem, so just emigrate. Maybe try China, try the United States. Thailand's a nice place. Emigrate. That's been happening a lot. Young people are emigrating from Spain to Brazil right now because of differences in the situations there. Now, if you can't immigrate, there's another thing you might want to seriously consider. Okay? You tell your parents in 2038, hey, mom and dad, I know you have some savings. You want to give me a bequest when you die. Don't wait. give it to me now. Give me a gift now in 2038. I'm going to take that gift and go out and buy my BMW and my mansion in 2038 before the consumption tax goes up. So you get the money now. Now, there's another puzzle here, a problem that you've probably read about. I mean, Paul Krugman talks about this all the time. We economists, we're horrible at forecasting. We can tell you there's a problem. We can't tell you when it's going to happen. And so given this horrible track record that we have, you might want to ask your parents to buy the BMW tonight. Okay, so what are corrective measures? Well, it's pretty clear that there are likely to be some corrective measures, okay? And so I'm sure, I don't know how I'm doing with time, but let me just talk about a couple real quick. One is, suppose we just fix the problem in 2019. How high would the consumption tax have to go just to fix it once and for all? 36%. That's how high, okay? And that's assuming no changes in fiscal expenditures. If you that's kind of not fair, because if you look at the time path, you have some people benefiting and others don't. So if you tailor the consumption tax instead, so it corresponds to periods when expenditures are high, it goes as high as 52%. Here's something that works. There are a lot of things that don't work very well in our setup. The one thing that seems to work pretty well is higher co-payments for elder retirees, higher co-payments for medical expenditures, higher co-payments for long-term care. If both of those are increased to, the statutory rate is increased to 30%, which is what working age people pay, that has a more substantial effect on the consumption tax. It only rises, in fact, it doesn't have to increase at all for quite some time. It can stay at its current level of 8%, and the peak value is 22%. What's the punchline for you guys? Well, you can see the punchline is no matter which of these scenarios you consider, everybody born in this room, what I'm showing you, you pay the government taxes of your life, and you get benefits back from the government over your life. People who were born before 1960, before 1960, you can see they receive more than they pay. Everybody in this room is going to pay out. Well, I have to be careful. Everybody in this room born after 1960, over their life, will pay out more than they get back. What about for you guys? Well, you guys are roughly in here, and you're going to pay the most on that. You're going to pay somewhere between 5 and 9 million yen in present value terms over your lifetime. So you guys, unfortunately, are right at the peak. One last thing, and then I'm done. We've been talking about higher fertility. Well, we've looked at higher fertility. And what higher fertility does, we understand that aging means a higher fraction of retirees. What are the short and medium-term rates of you guys going out and having more kids? Well, more schools, more expenses on young people, on very young people. So you actually have the overall dependency ratio going up even more. That means your taxes have to go up even more. So for you, a higher fertility rate is going to mean higher taxes. On the other hand, your grandchildren will be very grateful to you. So concluding remarks. If you decide to call your parents tonight and ask them for a BMW, please don't mention my name. Thank you very much.
Okay, the next presenter is the Associate Professor Shunichiro Besho of Keio University. Shunichiro is an expert on fiscal policy, taxation, health economics, and the social security system in Japan.
Hi, I'm Shunichiro Besho of Keio University, and I'm very happy to be here. And I feel a little bit nervous because Tony is one of my professors, and I was serving as a teaching assistant of the macroeconomics when I was a graduate student. And he taught me what the interesting thing in the macroeconomics is, but actually at the same time he also taught me that macroeconomics is too difficult for me. So I escaped from the macroeconomics and to run away to the public finance. So today I'll talk about the population aging and the health and long-term care in Japan. And so I decided to not to present my own research, but to raise two issues about the population aging. The first concern of the population aging is the fiscal sustainability, and I strongly agree with that the fiscal sustainability is quite important in an aging economy. And there are lots of options to achieve the sustainability, and the VAT consumption tax in Japan is not the only way. So, and when we consider how to adjust this country's fiscal situation, I think 2 points are very important. The first is health insurance. The second is inequality or distribution. And health insurance is, I think, more difficult than pension because, after all, pension is a matter of cash, but health is related to life. And the inequality or distribution is also important because we observe larger disparities in the elderly than in the younger generations. And we have not so progressive taxation or social insurance premium system. And I'd like to say some taxation, social insurance premiums are regressive in this economy. Next slide, this slide shows the fiscal situation in Japan. And the orange bars, this one, shows the expenditures on Social Security. As you can easily know, that Social Security share of among the government expenditure is increasing. And next, this shows that share of pension benefits and medical benefits. And this purple one is pension, and the orange is the health. My first point is that the health insurance is more difficult than pension. I agree that the pension system in Japan is not perfect. And the pension system still has many problems, but as Sal said, and pension has a macroeconomic slide formula, and this formula helps pension system sustainability maintained. And of course, it may need more intergovernmental and intergenerational transfers from maybe younger generation to older generations. And on the other hand, it is more difficult, maybe politically difficult, to cut down health insurance. Because people in general expect to receive new and latest state-of-art medicine. And sadly saying, new technology is often expensive. And these people's right to receive the new and latest medicine is related to life, so to cut down the health insurance is politically very difficult. And another reason is that the health is quite related to the first, but health expenditures are driven by technology progress mainly, and population aging is the topic in this symposium, but the population aging is not a major driver to increasing in the health expenditures. And because the health expenditure are driven by technology progress, it is hard to forecast forecast the expenditure size of the health expenditures. this shows that projections of health benefits share to GDP and by Ministry of Health, whatever, health and something, and yeah, thank you very much. And IMF, and this black line shows the actual path of health health benefits, and these colorful lines shows the projections by the ministry, and the past all projections are all underestimate the expenditure path. And the point is the population aging is easy to forecast, at least in 20 or 30 years, but in spite of that, the ministry fails to forecast the expenditures. And so how the ministry, or this includes IMF, forecast the health expenditures? The standard method, as far as I know, the standard method is that first we calculate the per capita health expenditures for each age group, and multiply the population size for that expenditure per capita, and summing up by the age groups. And the population is given exogenously based on the official population projections. And growth rate of expenditure per capita is often constant or same as GDP per capita growth rate. And I calculated if we had forecasted in 1975 how the health expenditure grows until now. And the lines bottom and the slight differences can be ignored in this discussion, but the bottom two lines shows if the health expenditures per capita are constant in real term, and only the population aging happened. In this case, the forecasted health expenditures are quite lower than the actual one. And the top two shows the projections if we assume that health expenditure per capita grow at the same speed as GDP per capita. And in this case, the projections are overestimating the actual path. And what I want to say by using this slide is that aging is not the main factor in the health expenditure growth, but the main driver is the income or technological progress. And usually, in this case, the actual path is lower than these two, but usually health expenditures grow faster than GDP. And the difference is called excess cost growth. And Japan is, as far as I know, one exception from of this phenomenon, and in the sense that the Japanese excess cost growth has been negative. And the reason why is excess cost growth is negative in Japan, while the other countries face a positive excess cost growth. And the reason is this may be politics. Politics depressed the expenditures by fee schedule revision because Japan achieved universal health coverage, and the government set all prices of medicine and medical and pharmaceutical activities in Keio, Central Social Insurance Medical Council. And, but I think that it will not be the case in the future because the slow economic growth is expected. And the politics has depressed expenditure so far, but we observe many medical collapse in some areas, in many areas. So politics cannot hold down the expenditures no more. And okay. My second point is inequality or distribution. And we observe the larger disparities in the elderly. And, in this regard, Keio economists, including president is missing, but the president, and pointed out the larger disparities in the elderly than the younger generations. And this is because due to disparities in labor income as well as pension benefits, but the pension benefits is proportional to earnings in younger days. And although the disparities is larger in the elder population, but we have not so progressive taxation or social insurance premiums. Well, before going that, I show the next slide. This graph shows a relative poverty rate by age group. Sorry, but the horizontal axis shows the poverty rate of the younger generation, working population, and the vertical axis shows the poverty rate of the elderly. And this blue line shows a 45-degree line, and Japan is here. It shows that the poverty rate of the elderly is larger than the younger ones. And the points are based on the OECD countries, so Japan is not an usual case among OECD countries. Of course, we have many exceptions here. And sorry. And we have more unequal or larger disparities, but we have not so progressive taxation or not so progressive social insurance premiums. And the personal income taxation system has become less progressive since late 1970s to 2000s under the slogan of the incentive to work or tax neutrality. Then it is represented by the deduction of the number of brackets and the deduction in the top marginal tax rate. And the personal income tax became almost a proportional taxation system. This shows the brief history of Japanese personal income taxation. And in 1970s, the national tax have 19 brackets, and the top marginal rate is 75%, and the local personal income tax has a top marginal rate with 4% and 14%. So the actual marginal rate is more than 90%. But now the number of brackets down to 6, and the local income tax is a perfect proportional tax. And we have less progressive tax system than before. And I'll skip this. And it's a very minor problem, but I'd like to say about this. The Social Security contribution is almost payroll tax. Payroll tax is tax based on your earnings or employment income, and a fixed rate of earnings for pension insurance. So everyone faces the same rate of pension insurance, but in case of health insurance, contribution rates differ among firms in health insurance. Under the association managed health insurance in Japanese Kumiai Kenpo. And because workers in large companies like Keio are healthy and rich, so the contribution rates are smaller in such a large company, rich companies than less rich companies. So the contribution rates, a correlation between contribution rates and average wage is negative. It means that the social premiums are regressively levied to the workers. To wrap up, I raised two issues in this small talk. Yes, I agree fiscal sustainability in an aging economy is quite important, but the social insurance is more difficult than pension. And Japan has managed health expenditure so far, but it's more tough to control health expenditures in the future in an aging economy. The second is we have to consider about the inequality or distributions because larger disparities in the elderly. And I make some comments here, but one thing I'd like to say is that the VAT is under discussion, policy discussion, debate, but the VAT, consumption tax, is not the only way. We have to consider the possibility of PIC, personal income tax, and especially property tax, now one of the local tax. And to consider that how to make proper tax system, we have to collect all wisdom from all of the disciplines of the science. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shinichiro. So thank you very much. Yeah. And the final speaker is the Professor Kobayashi of Keio University. So Keiichiro is one of the leading macroeconomists in Japan and published many studies on the policy issue in Japan, including the sustainability of the government debt and the problems in the financial market. And Keiichiro is also well known for his educational campaign to enhance economic literacy. He has written many books to discuss problems in Japanese economy based on his academic studies and to offer possible solutions. So anyway, so without further ado, so please join me welcoming the Professor Kobayashi.
Today I want to talk about sustainability of Japanese economy, especially on the deflationary equilibrium of Japan. So this is a summary of today's presentations by Sero and Tony, and we know that, my simplistic understanding is that Tony and Sero's presentation means that we have a huge challenge in the fiscal policy in order to restore the sustainability of the Japanese economy. So by sustainability, I mean that in order to reduce the public debt GDP ratio to about 60% in a year of 2100 or 150, in some previous paper by Tony and Doug Jones, they show that we need to increase the consumption tax rate to 33, or today he said 36%. Or in some, if we wait too long, then the consumption tax rate should be, he said today, 57% or 56% in some other previous versions. And also, Sero has another paper by Gary Hansen at UCLA, in which they argue that the same scale of the policy challenge. That means we need to increase consumption tax rate to 34% if we have a 2% economic growth forever, or maybe we need to increase consumption tax rate to 60% if the Japanese growth rate is gonna be 1.5% forever. So I think these policy prescription is politically very hard or nearly politically infeasible in Japanese policy, in Japanese democracy. So next point is, next natural question is, what happens if the tax rate is not raised, or if we cannot cut the public spending to the comparable size? The natural answer is, as Tony and Cero said in the today, we will have implicit default of government debt, or in other words, we will have an inflation tax, or in other words, it is a hyperinflation in Japan. So then why we have so stable market situation or stable inflation rate now? This is a next topic which I will talk in this presentation. So the question is that why we have a mild deflation continuing for many years. Tony and Nakajima-san at Kyoto University has another paper that explains this situation. So their claim is that, so even if hyperinflation is approaching to this country, deflation may continue for a very long time if some banks or some financial institutions in Japan are very, very optimistic. The logic is following. So there are lots of people who are pessimistic about JGBs, but pessimistic household or pessimistic business people cannot sell short the JGBs because there is some financial constraint. So if there is only few big banks who have a huge, who are very, very optimistic, then they will buy lots of government bonds and keep the price or keep the inflation rate very stable. So we can have a very persistent deflation, even though hyperinflation, the risk of hyperinflation is very high. That's the logic of their paper. So today, maybe I can stop here, but maybe I will show you some other interpretation of the reality of Japan. I think it is a very crazy idea. Actually, there's Matsuyama-san over there. The other day I said this idea to Matsuyama-san, and he said that it is a very crazy idea. So I hesitated to talk today, but I decided to talk this topic because I think the reality of Japan now is already crazy. So, so my hypothesis is as follows. So maybe people's fear for hyperinflation may worsen or exacerbate the current deflation. Let me explain how this works. So in an existing theory, there are lots of papers which explains the deflationary equilibrium. So such as Ben Habib, Schmidt-Grofe, and Uribe, and Egerton and Meltora. The puzzle of this existing literature on deflationary equilibrium is that in these models, deflationary equilibrium is not compatible with expansionary monetary policy as we observe in Japan. Why is that? Because the deflation is, by definition, it is an increase of the price of money in terms of the goods. So, and on the other hand, the expansionary monetary policy, such as quantitative easing, means an increase in the quantity of money. So if we have a deflation and expansionary monetary policy at the same time, we will have the total value of money increasing to the maybe infinity, because the price of money increase and the quantity of money increase, and so in the present value term, the total value of money increase to the infinity. So it is not sustainable equilibrium. So in the existing literature, such as paper by Ben Habib or Egerton, they in their paper in deflationary equilibrium, they require that the monetary policy is contractionary. That means that in the deflationary equilibrium, the quantity of money decrease at the rate of discount factor. So then what we observe, it is a puzzling, because what we observe is puzzling, because in Japan, we have 15 years of deflation, and also we have a low TFP growth. And also we have, we observe a rather expansionary monetary policy. I think it's not a contraction. And also we have a accumulation of government debt. So as I said, the existing economic theory of deflationary equilibrium cannot account for these features. I mean, they cannot account for the coexistence of expansionary monetary policy and persistent deflation. So it is not explained by the existing theory. So the idea, crazy idea, is as follows. We observe public debt accumulation. The accumulation of huge public debt may impair the credibility or people's credibility or people's confidence on the sustainability of the monetary regime. And so it raises the risk of regime change. So maybe people can think that with a small probability, fiat money may lose value and the economy goes to the non-monetary equilibrium. So non-monetary equilibrium means it's a hyperinflation. So let me only briefly explain. So this is a value of money which is the inverse of the price level, which evolve like this. It depreciates at the rate of inflation rate, which this pi t is a gross inflation rate. So money loses value at the rate of inflation rate with some high probability p. But with small probability 1 minus p, the money loses value. So it is a hyperinflation, the phase of hyperinflation. So if people expect this kind of dynamics in the future, for Japanese people, the money become a risky asset because there is a risk of hyperinflation. And so people require the risk premium for the money, which means the deflation by this probability p. So if with a larger risk of hyperinflation, then we can show that we have a more severe deflation in the theory. So what I want to talk is like this. If we have a more and more public debt accumulation, then the fear of hyperinflation increase then we will have people want more risk premium on money, so we will have a more severe deflation. So in this kind of story, we can show that expansionary monetary policy is compatible or can coexist with persistent deflation as an equilibrium outcome. Because the deflation of Japanese yen is a risk premium for risky money. So what we can say about policy from this hypothesis is as follows. So if this hypothesis is correct, we can say that zero nominal interest rate can enhance productivity. So it can enhance economic growth because the zero interest rate is better than positive interest rates. But at the zero lower bound, the quantitative easing has no real effects as long as the nominal interest rate hits the zero lower bound. And the quantitative easing just increases the excess reserve. And so what should we do to escape from this deflationary equilibrium is as follows. We need to reduce the probability of hyperinflation. So how can we reduce hyperinflation? So we come back to the gloomy story of Cero and Tony that in order to reduce the risk of hyperinflation, we need to increase the tax by very large scale, or we need to cut the public spending very severely. So by this hypothesis, maybe we can understand that fiscal consolidation is also necessary to escape from deflation. That's all.